Voici 4 invités avec nous. Jean-Michel Abrassard from Belgium. You're a doctor in psychology, author of the podcast Skepticism Scientifique and of the children's book series Zach and Zoe, Zététicien en herbe. Yes. Is that right?
Yeah, it's correct.
Okay, fine. Ben Radford, you are here with us. Live from the US of A, you're a member of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, and you're the co-host of the Squaring the Strange podcast and author of 13 books and thousands of articles on critical thinking, investigation, folklore, science literacy, and mysteries. Amardeo Sarma comes from Germany. Hi. He's the co-founder and chair of the German Skeptics organization and board member of the European umbrella organization, European Council of Skeptical Organization. Hello. Last
Hello.
but not least, the new contestant comes into the race. Jason Bloch, explain, you're from the Fidesz?
Yeah, I'm from Fidesz, is Federation of Association. I'm the secretary, general secretary, and I'm also president of a small skeptic association called Opinion sur Rue. It does street epistemology.
Thank you all for being with us today. So let us start our journey all over the world with you, Jean-Michel. You wanted to focus on the history of zététique in the Francophone community. I don't know if we can use the word zététique in English, Ben and Amadeo.
I was about to talk.
That's fine.
Okay, it's fine.
The skeptical inquiry used to be called the Zetetic scholar or something like that at the beginning, so that's known to us.
Yeah, skeptical inquiry used to be the Zetique, so I'm familiar with it. It's good.
Okay, everyone is on the same page. So Jean-Michel.
So first of all, I'm a member of the Comité Para. So it's the Belgium organization, and it's historically one of the first skeptical organization, probably maybe the first, depending how you define it. We have been looking into the past, and we have found some other organization before, but they were more focused usually, like just about pseudo-medicine or stuff like that. So the Comité Para is like the first skeptical organization like we find now in the modern world. And it was born just after World War II in 1947. After the war, there were lots of psychics and mediums who claimed they could find people on the battlefield. And a group of scientists got together and they created that group to try to inform the public about that from a scientific perspective. And I use the word Comité Para, but the original name, so that's a nickname, but the real name at the time was the Committee for Skeptical Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, but in French, of course, so it was the Comité pour l'investigation scientifique des preuves du paranormal. And that name became the name of the American organization when Paul Kurtz was inspired to create his own organization based on the Belgian one I think 1 decade later, something like that. Yeah, so Belgium was like the beginning of the modern skeptical movement, and I'm here to represent. As for the word zététique, it's also something typically, as we said, it has been used in America in English. The Zetetic Scholar was the name of the magazine before Skeptical Inquirer, but in France and in Belgium, we use it a lot more than in English, but maybe my colleague from France wants to talk about it.
Hi. So in France, it's historically linked to Henri Brock, and he tried to do inquiries based on science in a real laboratory and all that jazz. And so it has a new connotation now because of La Tronchambier, who are skeptical influencers in France since 2010.
And he's with us today?
Yeah.
And not in the same room, but he,
so
his ghost is here.
Oh, hey. Today it has a signification close to like new skeptical from the 20th century, something like that.
And what are the main topics right now in the French Zetetic, the French skeptic community?
Oh, elections, for instance, because it's general elections for the president these days.
lots of other stuff, trans identity and other things linked to that. It's there are really harsh debates these days between left and right in the skeptical community. And yeah, Jean-Michel, you're really well informed about that with Jeremy.
But I think we will talk maybe about really what focus or specific topics we have in our
And positive aspects also.
yeah.
No,
So
I'm joking. Okay, so in a few minutes we have this topic.
Mhm.
Amadeo, we are going to Germany with you. How the COVID crisis has been a huge stress test for the skeptic community in Germany.
Yes, well, in fact, this was one of the things that we took up very early because we realized that what we already knew about conspiracy theories in many other places, like the 9/11 conspiracy or about the moon landing conspiracy, suddenly the same kind of thing cropped up in COVID-19. And so we put a lot of effort in starting more than 2 years ago with a special issue coming out from Skeptics as well, pointing out to all the ways that science is being misrepresented. And this goes well beyond, public debates as to how effective one or the other thing is, but real hard conspiracy theories going up to Bill Gates putting chips into you through vaccines and things like that. So it's been quite an effort for us, but this is to be seen in the broader range of conspiracy theories, which clearly has been a change maybe in the last 10, 20 years compared to the first 20 years of our existence, is where we had more traditional topics that we dealt with. Pseudo-medicine, homeopathy, acupuncture, and so on have been a topic all the time. But especially in the last 10 to 20 years, conspiracy theories of all kinds have come up to flat earthers that we thought maybe 20 years ago nobody would believe in that at all. But apparently there is a group of people that even believe in that. So we have a lot of work to do, and the work has increased with the COVID-19 crisis.
On your side in USA, Ben Radford, the topics are like a bit more folkloric, I might say. You're interested into psychic detectives, into vampires. You're going back to the Victorian era and trying to contacting the dead. What are the trends in this in the skeptic community, Ben?
Yeah, it's a great. And first of all, thank you all for inviting me. This is wonderful to be here, and I wish I could be there in person, and maybe next time. So, yeah, in many ways, it sort of echoes what Amadeo was saying, that that especially these days with the pandemic, of course, there's misinformation and COVID related stuff. My background is in folklore and psychology and education as well, so I sort of blend those together. And it's interesting because there's these topics sort of come in cycles. So it's the old rubber duck syndrome, as we talk about in skepticism, right? It's like you think something is long dead and then all of a sudden it's back again. I'll give you an example. Just earlier this week, I was in Los Angeles for a TV shoot for a new William Shatner TV show, and the topic was the Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle. This has been a non-mystery since 1975, and they're still digging it up like a vampire. So
what does that mean? The fact that it comes back from the dead, this kind of
well, it's it's one of those mysteries that even though there's really no mystery there, because it's been pretty well explained by Larry Kush in his book and others as well, there's they need something to fill the time. They need something to fill more episodes, and so they have to go deeper and deeper into basically solved mysteries, and they try and and sex it up. So that's part of it. My approach is investigative skepticism. So earlier, Paul Kurtz was mentioned. Of course, he co-founded the Center for Inquiry, and of course he died a while back. And I was fortunate to work with Paul for many years, and he was more on the philosophical side. And the sorts of things that I do is looking at like I said, the folklore, the investigation, sort of where the rubber hits the road, if you will, where the real, not the abstract theoretical aspects, which is fine. My interest, like Armadeo's and Joe Nickel and Massimo Polidoro and people like that, is to look at where people are actually being affected most by these harmful beliefs, and that would of course include COVID misinformation.
And what do you think of the fact that all the previous COVID experts are turning now into geopolitical experts in just like a snap of a finger?
Yes, it's amazing. I don't know why I bothered to get an education or anything, because all I really need to go on Facebook for an hour, and I'll be informed as to exactly what the truth is. So that's, and again, this gets into psychology, gets into the Dunning-Kruger effect, it gets into confirmation bias, it gets into all these different things. So that's really what jumps out at me. So my focus, especially over the past few years, has been media literacy, health education, particularly regarding COVID. Center for Inquiry, we did a whole part of the website that was devoted specifically to COVID misinformation and trying to get that out there. So that's what we've been doing.
I'm trying to find out all the cultural differences. So for you, Amardeo, maybe in France we have the cliché of the German who are very pragmatic. Nonetheless, you have the same obsession in the population, COVID related or climate denier. There is no specific German point of view on these topics. Finally you're like everyone.
Yes, that's
just
true.
as nuts as everyone as we are in France.
Yeah, that's true on the one hand. On the other hand, some of the bad things have come from Germany, like homeopathy has come from Rudolf Steiner is also a movement that came from Germany. So it's not just the positive side. You see that, in fact, I think each country region has its own specific pseudo-sciences that come up and go. And I think one of the things that have helped a lot is the global cooperation that we've had, because some things that start in one place at some later stage are going to go over and hit some other country. One place where we did benefit a lot was the discussion along. It's a very specific topic, but it's about autism and facilitated communication. When it came up first in Germany, we knew that our skeptics colleagues in the US and in Australia had already dealt with that. So we got to write an article in Skeptica about facilitated communication from Gina Green. And we sent it to all the autism-related organizations, and we think we helped stop it because we made use of the information we got from other places. At the same time, I think when I went to the US the first time, they said things like, oh, pseudo-medicine, all this homeopathy and stuff, we don't know that. That's a very typically German. But I think that's changed completely over the last 30 years, right? So that's come from Europe to the US. So I think it helps to watch out what's going on in other places, because it'll come over at some stage.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because you pointed the facilitated communication for autism, and I'm not sure the French people know what it is, because
chic, a new topic.
Yeah, I was about to say that one of the problems we have in French-speaking world is psychoanalysis, which is, of course, there is a little bit of psychoanalysis in the English-speaking world, but in France, it's very omnipresent, and in psychology faculty, you have to do a lot of psychoanalysis, and I speak from experience. And we have dealt a lot with some psychoanalytic treatment for autism that have really bad results, but so I don't think people have been exposed to facilitated communication. So I can explain briefly what it is for the people in the room. But facilitated communication is a kind of a quote unquote treatment for autism, when you take the hand, or maybe the German guest can explain, but and you pretend the autist people can communicate by touching something with it, and actually it's kind of
you share the energy.
Yeah.
You have to be more open-minded, Jean-Michel.
It's
a revolution.
Ideomotor motion, like that. You think the people who are actually supporting these autistic children don't think they are moving it themselves, but they are, in fact. It's something similar to dowsing. So that's the way it works. When you talk about psychoanalysis, that's another thing that came from Germany, by the way. One of the bad things with Sigmund Freud.
I don't know where you are, Sigmund, but you will hear from us. And so in France, what are our obsession now? But I find it quite surprising. You can have some very specific topics, but globally we have the same interpenetration of all these themes. Maybe it's because of the all the digital world and everything is shared at the light of the speed, or there is no specific. We share the
It
same
seems that
obsessions.
there's a kind of globalization of these beliefs.
Mm.
For instance, you talked about flat earthers. Sorry, it's a French documentary that was supposed to be a joke that revived it globally. But sometimes we find disinformation that comes from cryptozoologists in Brazil or in Israel and other kind of place. Maybe these days with internet, like beliefs are more globalized than it used to be.
Keep your crazy bullshit on your side of the ocean.
Or you can talk with your chupacabra and your psychic detectives and your ghosts. And you have a way to make it very glamorous for us. You even that you turn it into a nice Hollywood show, and everyone say, "Oh, nice chupacabra, a vampire." You have this the nick to transform all this crap into wow. So it's harder for you to debunk all that, Ben.
It
With all your
is.
folklore.
Yeah, I mean, it's and what I'm especially seeing with folklore, and again, I love folklore. Last time I was in Europe, actually, I was giving a talk at a folklore conference in Brussels, which was just lovely. And so, but yeah, it's just folklore is all around us, and oftentimes it's not recognized as folklore. I have a podcast called Squaring the Strange, and just a few months back, we did a series on moral panics. And a lot of moral panics involve folklore. It's sort of the stories that people tell and the legends and rumors and things like that. And I'll just give you one quick example. Recently, there's online panics about what kids today are doing. And so there were concerns that were circulating in Europe and in the UK about online games. For example, there was this thing called the Blue Whale Challenge, and there was the Momo Challenge, and more recently there was another one, and they're sort of like Slender Man, and so it's this folkloric fear of technology, and this sort of notion of like, you know, this idea that there's simple, apparently innocuous, pleasant, benign apps and games that people are playing, but there's this hidden subtext and this sort of evil, darker side that you also see, for example, in the concerns about moral panics over stranger danger and you know, the evils of heavy metal music and things like that, and these sorts of things, and they tie in with QAnon, for example, and QAnon ties in with anti-vax. So it all sort of comes together when you look at it from a folkloric perspective.
You have a lot of work also in Florida right now, considering moral panics. But that's another subject. Jean-Michel.
Yeah, about folklore, but because on one side there is a globalization of the skeptical movement and obviously the topics that go with them. But I think for some, I was giving the psychoanalysis subject, but for some topics it's quite regional, like based on a region. For example, about UFO abductions, but it's something a lot more common in America. But I specialize in UFOs from a skeptical point of view, but to find an abductee in France is really hard. You have to dig really far to find someone who claims he has been abducted by aliens, when in America, so of course, because there's the influence of culture on that. But on the other hand, we have quite a few crop circles in France every spring. So those take different.
And we have Didier Raoult also.
Yeah, we have Didier Raoult. That's the. I'm not French, so I don't claim him.
It's a French mad scientist who was raised to fame.
I have an explanation for that. So what I think is going on is the aliens, they keep the French, they abduct. They bring back the Americans to tell their story, and they keep the French. That's my guess.
They become cooks in their big spaceships. They have good taste. Yeah, and you've also noticed in your Hollywood movies that they always storm the Capitol and never the Eiffel Tower, or there have never been any aliens here in Toulouse. Never, ever. It's quite surprising. So let's go back to Germany, our atavic enemy. So that's why I want to insist on with Amardeo on a more serious side. When we prepared this interview, you talked a lot about the climate change and climate skepticism, which I find it a bit surprising for me, French, because I thought all the climate deniers they lost the battle. Okay, we don't do anything to change that, but they seem to have lost the battle of the 80s. But you told me that it's still a subject in Germany, all the concern about the climate change denier.
Right, that's correct. I mean, I think you're correct on one point, and that is I believe that the climate deniers have lost the game. In fact, even all over the world, even slowly in the United States and other places right now. So that so regular climate is becoming mainstream, but then still there's a lot of issues going around climate which sometimes go beyond what climate science says. And so there are also exaggerations, and some events are being traced back to climate change when they are not yet, according to the IPCC, responsible for that. So there's more nuance in this at this point, I would say. And I think most of the debate right now is going around on what to do about climate change, because that's a huge problem that's going to affect us over the years. Especially, I think the rising sea levels is going to be one of the biggest issues. And I think keeping on talking about this, so I started talking about climate issues about 10 years ago at conferences. It was at the London Skeptics organized conference as well. So I think it's something that needs to be where constant education helps. But I think it's got to be education that's really fact-based, and we have to make sure that the information is really based on what we know today and doesn't go beyond that.
You started your job of being a skeptic a long time ago. Are you still optimistic on the outcome of convincing people to get back on the right tracks?
Well, I think it's like we were discussing that some topics come and go. Ben Radford was talking about the rubber duck phenomenon. You think some things have gone. So it's also like you have criminals going around all the time. So it's like a fact of life that there's going to be pseudosciences. There's going to be people being taken in all the time, and it's going to be a constant duty and job for us all to point out to what the real facts are in this direction, and to make sure that the people are informed. Of course, we cannot tell them what to do, but we can at least tell them what the situation is, what the facts are at the moment.
Jean-Michel.
And in fact, let me just come back to one thing, because you were mentioning I think Ben Radford was talking about the Bermuda Triangle. In fact, that's what brought me, one of the 3 books that brought me to skepticism. And that was reading Larry Kush. And I said, my goodness, there's this guy, selling millions of books, telling things that are basically not true. And here's this guy called Larry Kush, comes around and shows that it's all wrong. And he sells 100s, maybe 1,000s of the number of books that Charles Burlett sells. So that's one of the initiations, if you like, for me at the time, that to say, okay, we really need to have an instance like Cyclop in the US at the time, in Germany as well, to provide information for the people. So it's not our job to tell people what to do or what to think, but everybody should have access to skeptical information all over the world so that they can make up their own minds.
Yeah, actually, I have a question for the other guests about the popularity of skepticism in their country. In Belgium, it's a little bit growing, but our organization is still quite small, I think. I have an idea about France, but I will let my colleague from France talk about it. But we are in a big event here, so that's a clue already. But I would be curious to know in Germany and in America, how is the skeptical movement now? Is it very popular, or yeah, that's my question.
Okay, so the situation is about the same in Belgium than in France. It's like a little bit growing.
Yeah, but
small communities.
Okay.
Ben, on the American side.
Yeah,
are we alone?
It's interesting because Cyclop was founded in 1976 by Paul Kurtz and the amazing Randy and people like that, and with Carl Sagan. So I mean, it emerged in a very specific context, and this was concerns about the rise of the New Age and Atlantis and Bermuda Triangle and weird things like that. So it emerged. The recognition by Paul Kurtz and others that this was necessary really only emerged in that context. And so in terms of the question of skepticism, in America today, I think there's a couple of nuances here. One is that the term skeptic doesn't have much traction. People don't know what the hell it is. Maybe we should go to zetetic. I mean, it's just if people say what is it? I tell people I'm a skeptic, and they say, "You doubt things? What does that mean?" Right? People, and so it's. I don't reject the label, but it's not useful. The average person that really doesn't know what it is, and so what I've suggested that we do is try and not necessarily rebrand it, but focus more on the science education parts. So focus on the media literacy parts. Focus on the folklore parts. So you don't need to say, "Hey, everybody, I'm teaching you skepticism." You can say, "Hey, we're teaching you science. We're teaching you critical thinking," because that's sort of the part that sort of is more easily understood and digested by the public. And anyway, and the other part would be sort of in Skeptical Inquirer magazine, we cover all sorts of things. We cover homeopathy. We cover ghosts. We have Steven Pinker, we have all sorts of stuff. And as I've mentioned, my particular interest is in sort of the weirder side things, right? The Bermuda Triangle and ghosts and psychic detectives and monsters. I love that stuff. That's what got me into it. But I also try to focus on the urban legends and the media literacy and critical thinking. So I think that by making it broad, by covering a broad area and not sort of getting too niche, I think that really helps. And so I think that there has been more of a recognition of the need for skepticism and critical thinking, especially during the pandemic, because people, it's become mainstream news to point out how harmful COVID misinformation is. So I think that there may be a glimmer, that may be a silver lining, is that people are starting to recognize just how harmful misinformation is and recognizing the need to address it.
I'd like to add to that. Right. I'd like to add to that. I think it's correct. I mean, we have the same issue with skepticism here as well, because skepticism as a word doesn't come across so well. So we've been trying to focus more on similar lines, like you said, on two aspects. One is we are pro-science, we are for science, and we are for critical thinking. So critical thinking as a tool that helps you in any walk of life. I mean, we can't give you all the answers to everything, so you should have the tools in your hand to be able to decide on yourself. And as far as the topics are concerned, I also go along with that quite a bit, because we've also said that we want to focus on those topics that have a bigger impact, which are not just an intellectual exercise. Oh, we are right and the other guys are wrong. But it's about things that affect others, that have a negative impact. Our first president, Professor Irmgard Oepen, used to say it's not so much about being on the right side, but what kind of, because she was a doctor, she said the harm it might do to patients. So we should be looking a lot more at which kind of information leads to harm amongst everybody. And I think that's something which is a kind of a bit more of a social thing, if you like, but it's still something, we're doing it for a purpose. We're not just doing it because we want to be so clever, but we are doing it because if you don't go along with science, you might be harming yourself and others, society.
You were talking about rebranding, and in France, there's lots of rebranding. They try to rebrand skepticism, like zetetic and other stuff. And it's like, for us, our federation, we had a hard time to decide on what name should we choose, because we are only 1 year old. We are brand new, and
you are brand new and you are considering rebranding.
No, we had to brand ourselves. So we were considering rebranding skepticism.
Why? Because
Or
the term skepticism was a repellent. I don't understand.
it's the same kind of confusion you described. Like, for instance, people think about ancient philosophy when you talk skepticism, and you say, no, it's not solipsism. Yeah, you have to try to find a way of conveying these ideas. And skepticism for most people is confusing.
It sounds a bit sad.
Why?
You have to have a wording, a chain of word in order to be more convincing, which means there is a lack of cultural science in France, or rationalism, or we are supposed to be the land of Descartes.
Rationalism is also very confusing, because what's being rational is not the same for most people. So being rational can be anti-climate or things like that for some people. So or for flat earther, they think they are rational. So
okay.
Yeah, I think in that same vein, actually, when I'm here in Toulouse, and I can see that, for example, the old topics from Zetetic, like Ben or me, we are covering like the weird UFO and Loch Ness monsters and that kind of stuff. It's not very popular anymore in France, and no, what's really popular is critical thinking and teaching critical thinking. The most lectures are about that topic. It's like to make the skeptical movement or Zetetic popular, we have to, the focus, I feel, is really on the critical thinking, to the point that people think that Zetetic means teaching critical thinking only, which I think is debatable. But so I think for us, the focus is really now in France, the trend is really about teaching critical thinking. And also because, to be honest, I think there is, if you're at university, you can have money for that kind of topic. Of course, it's popular because of that too.
Ben, you are working on a large array of topics concerning the skeptic movement, which are completely out of date here in France, as Jean-Michel said. No, I'm joking. What is the real problem with clowns?
What is the real problem with clowns? We don't have enough time for me to explain the real problem of clowns. I could tell you the problem with mimes in 20 minutes, but we don't have the problem with that. So really, you know, I did a book on bad clowns and evil clowns, and there was, as many of you may remember, there was a whole panic. There were literally the global panics over clowns, and this ties in with what I was talking about before about moral panics and social media panics and people freaking out. So it was fascinating. I had a colleague, Aurora van de Winkel, who lives in Brussels, and we two were sort of the world's top evil clown experts, which is weird to even say out loud. But
a badge of honor.
Yeah, badge of honor. Yeah, well, I'll take it. Right.
Worldwide expert matter of mad clowns.
Well, yeah, it's my obituary is going to be very weird. I'll just say that at the top. But yeah, so that was part of it. Was but you know, what was interesting to me was looking at it from a folkloric and cultural point of view, because you know, every culture has clowns. But in your, and some of them are political, as you know. But what was interesting was that just real briefly was that in Europe, clowns were never assumed to be good. It was just they are their own figures. So clowns were good, clowns are bad. But here in America, and this is something that Stephen King turned on its head with Pennywise in his novel It. Clowns were assumed to be good, and therefore he twisted it on his head and turned it into this horrifying Pennywise. So that's, in a nutshell, that's the thing with clowns.
Okay, we'll take the opportunity of having an audience here. Est-ce que vous avez des questions? Oui, alors on va faire passer le micro.
Il est là.
On va autonomiser notre public. Ah non, non, mais oui, j'arrive. Alors attends, d'abord devant, vas-y, prends le micro. Et prends l'autre, et ensuite on va le passer, parce qu'on disait qu'aussi s'il y a des gens qui posent des questions tout en haut, on ne peut pas les entendre. Donc question en anglais, évidemment.
Yes.
Okay, first question.
Yep. So basing my question on an assumption, so you can tell me after if this assumption is wrong to you. So yeah, basing my question on the fact that maybe our skeptic or scientific communities want to grow, could you identify events that made those community grow in numbers? And to you, are there ways to replicate those events or to benefit from similar movements, I think, that our communities could use to be interesting to many more people?
It's a question for
anybody that wants to answer it.
So Michel, growing the
in France and Belgium, I think clearly the YouTube is a big factor. So internet, but YouTube especially, because the younger generation is really into watching videos, and I'm from the old generation where people were reading news, skeptic magazines and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm not sure we can replicate that. I mean, if there is a new technology that comes and change, but if it's for like having an event like the COVID crisis and use that to make it grow, I'm not sure we can do it, except if we can have a huge star. But I'm thinking in America, Carl Sagan, but Ben will maybe say something about it. If we have a huge star, that becomes someone in the media. We haven't had in France or in Belgium yet.
We might need to go on TikTok if we need to replicate YouTube.
Une autre question? Allez-y.
So I can let me just add to that. I think both things have played a role in the last. We've had growth in the last 2 years, and there were two things that contributed. In fact, one of them was that we did have much more podcasts done by a lot of people who were pointing to us as a skeptics organization. That's one thing. But the other thing was also that through the COVID crisis, we provided information very early. So this became a place where people went to get information. Then they joined us as well, became members and supported us and things like that. So I think two things play a role. We have to use the new media. Obviously, that's very important. But the other thing is also when there are really topics that are coming up that are making a difference to people, that are hurting people, and then you provide the right kind of information, because then there's a real need for it. Then this kind of thing helps. When there's anti-vax movement starting, we started a new website on specifically countering a film that came up. So I think following up on things that are where we see that the public is being misled and providing information, I think that at the right time, I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what my colleagues were saying. Obviously Carl Sagan was a huge science popularizer in the 70s and 80s, and then you had other people such as Bill Nye the Science Guy and Neil deGrasse Tyson. And Neil Tyson, he goes on nightly talk shows. He's on Jimmy Kimmel. He's on these other programs. And so there's obviously that's difficult to replicate because there are only so many sort of really internationally prominent science educators. But you have documentaries. There's a new documentary that's recently available called Science Friction that talks about how people have been skeptics and scientists have been misportrayed in the media. So that's part of it. And just to follow up on what Amadeo was talking about, is one of the things that skepticism does really well. There are many things it doesn't do great. One of the things it does well is to give credible science-based information on niche topics. That niche topic could be chupacabras. That niche topic could be ghosts. That niche topic could be facilitated communication, or it could be COVID misinformation. And so if you can put yourself out there, and if you can cultivate media contacts that say, okay, if you have a news story about X, Y, or Z, or again, rumors, and I mean, there's so many things that you can apply a skeptical lens to. Once you get in their Rolodexes, you can get more information out there, because again, they can talk to all the cranks and the nutters. But even if it's even a somewhat reputable journalistic organization, at some point they're going to want to talk to skeptics. They want to talk to me or Amadeo or Joe or Jean-Michel or somebody else like that, and that's the chance to sort of get in there and educate people.
Ça marche? Oui. Okay. So I have a very specific question for like German side of of people here. So probably Amadeo Sarma. Thanks to you all first of all for this very interesting speech. The thing is, I'm living in Germany since 8 years now, and since a couple of years, 2-3 years, I began getting involved at my own scale with people surrounding me to try to bring them into critical thinking. And because of my laziness, I have to confess it, I still have no resources in German from the German side about critical thinking. I took for it for 1 year the very stupid decision to begin to translate the French videos, because we have a lot of content, but it's not really efficient because people don't feel really like concerned because it's not their own language, and they are too lazy to like pause the video to be really sure to understand what's going on in the video. And the point is now, do you have any YouTube resources that you could suggest for beginners in this domain that is
in German?
Yeah, in Germany.
Okay, Amadeo.
Per extension, in every other country, if you have if you have any suggestion. But for me, I'm concerned with Germany.
Yes, we do have. Yes, we do have a YouTube channel with a lot of topics. Many of the conferences, the talks that we've held there are now available on YouTube as well, so you can have a look at those. So there's a lot of content there. But one of the things we want to expand on, I think that's one of the things you addressed, is we want to do more on the aspect of critical thinking itself. And we're going to be working on that in the next couple of years. We unfortunately don't have so much information on the critical thinking side, but we're going to have somebody working specifically on this side and trying to push new content. But if you look at just the content side of topics wise, we have a lot available on YouTube, for example, that I can send you a link to if you like.
Yes, very. I would be glad, but how? Just
could you drop a few names?
That would be really. I would be really grateful, to be honest.
A few names on what exactly? On the topics?
On YouTube channels or on topics that I could. I mean, I still miss the vocabulary in German to know what how to help people to orient themselves in such a theme.
So what I would suggest is, if you go to our main website, that is www.gwup.org, you will find the link to almost everything else, including our YouTube channel. And you can look at all the information that is there. So it's www.gwup.org. And there's a whole number of topics are even into things like science denial and so on.
GWP.org?
Yes, gwup.org.
gwp.org. Okay.
There's a link to this YouTube link as well, and to Twitter and other things as well. But if you're looking specifically for video content, you can find a lot there as well.
Ok. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions? Même en français, hein. Vous pouvez remarquer, si vous êtes resté là, c'est que vous comprenez l'anglais. Allez, profitez de la présence de nos experts. Regardez la présence de Claire et de Edzard. Désolé, je me suis rendu compte après coup que, enfin, donc, sinon je vous aurais expliqué pourquoi ils n'étaient pas là. Ils n'étaient pas là, comme vous avez pu le voir. Des questions? One more question. In German? Okay, fine.
It's not really a question, but it's more like a personal, let's say, personal life experience towards conspiracy behavior in Germany. The difference between France and Germany. I really, from what I understood till now, on your opinion, that there was not that much difference between France and Germany about COVID skepticism. I didn't make the same observation. I have the impression. It lies on the fact that I inform myself more from the French side, but I have the impression that German side is really way less complotist. I don't know if I can say it like this, but the German
Conspiracy theorists.
conspiracy seems to be way more able to trust the government and trust has way less trust issues than in France, at least from what I see in my surroundings. If I should count about, if I should count the people I know around me in France that are like believing in a wrong way, if I can say that, I could without problem go to 20 when in the place where I live in Germany, I have like 4 or 5 people where I live in. I don't live in France, and I really have the impression that German people, at least for this at least for this aspect of critical thinking, are way more down to earth.
Your sample is too small, but okay.
Sorry.
Ton échantillon est trop petit, mais d'accord.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And how it works. Okay.
Yeah, that may be right, but I think it could also be because we've not only, it's not just been us, but there's been a lot of very good information that's being made available about these things. But then again, I have to say, I mean, I know a lot of people who even in the let's say broader family, who believe in this kind of stuff and believe that vaccinations don't work and that they're harmful and things like that. So that kind of thing is quite widespread. It's also different depending on which area of Germany you live in. So, for example, the skepticism about vaccination is particularly strong in southwest of Germany and in the east of Germany, and not so much in the north. It's something like also when we're talking about another topic, which is the Shroud of Turin, which seems to be very much a Catholic issue, because in the south of Germany, when there's much more of it. And on the train, I once talked to somebody from Sweden, was on the same train while I was going to give a talk exactly on that. And she didn't know anything about it, because in the Nordic countries, that's not an issue. So I think it will also depend on which region in Germany you are in, and it's going to be very different. So where are you in Germany? Maybe you can tell me that, and I can tell you that's...
Köln.
In Köln. Okay, that's not a place where there's a lot of let's say vaccine deniers and so on. So that may be a more rational part of Germany. As far as that is concerned, I mean, it depends on which.
He was in Stuttgart.
Stuttgart is of course already more towards this kind of thinking. But again, I don't want to make too much generalizations. It's just kind of there are other things which may be more widespread in other places, but especially for example, the Rudolf Steiner school thinking is much more widespread in the southwest of Germany.
Yeah, about COVID, we don't have numbers. It would be interesting to have studies comparing the beliefs. Of course, in France, we had Didier Raoult, which was that famous scientist who did a lot to misspread information about the COVID-19. And I'm not sure he didn't have the same impact clearly in Germany, or his YouTube channel was very popular here. So I'm not surprised if disbelief in vaccine efficacy is stronger in Belgium than in Germany. Yeah, also I wanted to point out about the skeptical movement. There are also, I lived in Japan for quite a while, and there's no skeptical movement to speak out. The only skeptics in Japan are expat people, so Americans living in Japan. And so there are also countries like that. Of course, we don't have an expert from Japan here because there's no skeptical movement there. Really.
What do you mean? They trust the government? They don't have all these...
No. Just the skeptical movement didn't really spread there yet.
Because so you lived in Japan.
Yeah, I lived in Japan for 5 years. So I was
speak in Japan.
Yeah, I do speak Japanese. So
just let me add to that. I work for a Japanese company in my real life. So I've also been in Japan quite a few times. And I would agree that in general, also the Japanese seem to be more rational on the whole, I would say. But they also have the peculiarities. Maybe you can confirm that. They have things like the blood group being very important, giving you some kind of information about yourself. So it's like, astrological science that's not so popular there, but then the blood group suddenly becomes very important. So even those countries that are more rational have their own kind of pseudoscientific.
And let's not forget about the yokai and the yurei, right? The ghosts in Japan. This is right up my alley. I've never been to Japan, but yeah, there's they in general they believe that there's spirits in mountains and rivers and trees, and it's generally benign. I mean, it's not the sort of belief that's really hurting people, but it's fascinating. So I just that's one thing I really love about Skeptics conferences and bringing different cultures together to sort of discuss and debate and stuff, because there's so much that we can learn by comparing and contrasting different cultures and skepticism there.
Thank you, Ben. Now I want to rewatch Spirited Away.
Yes.
But Venice Ghosts.
Miyazaki.
Okay, thank you everyone. No questions? Non, il faut prendre le micro, jeune homme. Bien sûr, vous pouvez, mais c'est parce qu'on enregistre, il y a des vidéos, et puis ensuite, sinon, on ne peut pas vous entendre. So, one last question for...
So aren't we forgetting to talk about sort of some major cultural differences? For instance, in Germany, there's much more obedience and a better relationship to the government. For instance, you're not going to cross the street if the light is red, whereas the French are known for being rebellious frogs and so on. And then in Japan...
It's a cliché and generalization?
Come on, what's that?
Cliché and generalization.
Yes, that is what I'm using. Yeah, je m'appuie sur ça. Yeah.
Essentialization of people. French are lazy. German
but as far as like East Asia, it is true that there's a lot more shame that is going to be attributed to someone who wants to move in a different direction than the population. And so, which is why I would expect that it's going to take longer for a movement such as skepticism, if it disagrees with whatever the currently held belief is, to take hold. Because of the shame that's attached to going in another direction.
Who wants to answer that?
Oh, sorry, that wasn't well.
No, it was more a state of. It was an address.
But that was why I brought up Japan, because I do think that yes, there is a globalization of the skeptical movement, but I do think there are some cultural flavor. And one of the points, we brought some topics from Japan just before, but one thing is they have pseudo-medicine in Japan, of course, but they don't have homeopathy. And homeopathy is such a big topic in Europe and America.
It's German.
Yeah. And for the anecdote, I went to Japan and I went to see my doctor, and he was like, "Oh, you're from Europe, so you must know that very interesting thing called homeopathy. Could you tell me more about it? I'm very interested." And I was like, my face was turning red at that point. But so that was the...
Okay, you have to take a duck, the heart of a duck. You have to make it rot.
Yeah.
Add lots of water, lots and lots of water.
Lots of water, yeah.
I mean, I think one thing we've got to be a bit careful about is saying, believing in the government. I think we should be a bit careful about generalizations in general, overall. But I think it may be correct that people are a bit more obedient towards the government in Germany. But then on the other hand, we have in Germany governments that have over many decades been promoting things like homeopathy much more than in other countries. So obedience in a way can become a downside as well, that you're believing in things that are wrong because the government is supporting it.
Jason?
I don't know if it's correct, but I think maybe in Japan, with their belief, they're more syncretic. They add beliefs together, and in other cultures, for instance, monotheism, it's more about purity than adding. You can be an apostate or something like that, and maybe it's like the general influence of their religion that has this influence on beliefs.
Faut demander à Jean-Michel. Let's ask Jean-Michel, our Japan expert now. Self-proclaimed Japan expert. No. You were very cautious about that.
I will. Yeah, why Japanese is a culture's kind of different. So let's say so different than Western culture is a very difficult topic, and I won't address it in 5 minutes here. I'm sorry, but it's too broad a topic.